What an honor it is to welcome back on a busy week the former Vice President of the United States, our friend Dick Cheney, who's written a wonderful contribution for history, the book In My Time, a personal and political memoir written with his daughter Liz Cheney. Our friend Dick Cheney back on the Common Sense Club. How are you, sir?
Hello, Scott. Well, I'm doing very well, thank you.
Congratulations on the book. It's fabulous.
Well, we had a lot of fun doing it. It took us a couple of years, but there was a lot to write about, and it was a pleasure to get to do it with Liz, to have your daughter interested enough to sit there and listen to all those old war stories was good fun.
That's pretty neat. And you were kind enough to say some wonderful things about my book, Grassroots, about the Tea Party movement that's out right now. So I know what it's like. It feels like giving birth or something when these things come out. It's like a huge relief, but a lot of fun. And, of course, my contribution to his history is minuscule compared to yours, so I can't put it down. It's a great book, and I'm really glad you wrote it. And Liz helped, obviously, immeasurably. I got to tell you a quick story about Liz. I think it was the summer of 2010. I had a funny hunch about something. I don't know, and I sent her an email, and I said, how's your dad? And she said, funny you would mention that, but he's having a tough time right now, and explained the health problems, which you talk about in the book. And I said, we'll start a prayer chain. So I just want you to know, lots of folks in the heartland of America, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, where I was broadcasting at the time, we're praying for you, and we're glad you're on the mend.
Well, I appreciated that. Somebody certainly was, and it meant a lot.
You know, you talk about the book. It's fascinating. Here's your family, obviously very, very concerned about what you're going through, but you were in a heaven-like state, sort of dreaming, you talk about in the book, right?
That's right. I woke up after I'd been incapacitated in the ICU for about 5 weeks and heavily sedated through much of that period. And but when I woke up, what I remembered was having been in Italy, eating great Italian food and enjoying the beautiful surroundings in northern Italy.
Well, that's not bad. Not bad at all. It'd be the way to do it if you were going through a tough time, which you were, and we're grateful that you're...
Well, they all wanted to know if they were with me at the time, if they'd joined me over there, and unfortunately I couldn't say they had. I'd been alone, and that created a little tension in the family.
Let's talk about some other things in the book. You open with the story of 9/11, and specifically an amazing time when literally as a result of the attacks on the Pentagon and New York City, you were rushed out of your office by your security detail, literally picked up by the belt and marshaled out of there, carried out of your office. What were you thinking at that exact moment?
Well, we watched the second plane come in and hit the World Trade Center. First one had already hit, and then when they came and evacuated me, as they took me out of the office and hustled me down into the PEOC underneath the Presidential Emergency Ops Center, they informed me that there was an airplane headed for what was called Crown. That was the code word for the White House at 500 miles an hour from the direction of Dulles Airport, and that's why they'd evacuated me. And then in very short order, the word came in that plane had hit the Pentagon. And so that's what we were immediately focused on as they evacuated me from my West Wing office. As soon as I got word the Pentagon had been hit, I got the president on the telephone on a secure call and urged him to stay away from Washington until we could find out what was going on. That was the first indicator we had that Washington was under attack too, and it was important for the two of us not to bunch up where we could both be killed in one attack, and why it was important for us to stay separated until we knew what was going on.
Were you thinking we are under attack and this is probably Osama bin Laden, a jihad on America, the war on terror has begun? Was that rolling through your head at those early hours?
Well, we didn't know precisely that it was Osama bin Laden at that minute. I mean, it became clear in relatively short order. What I was thinking, I'd had the responsibility over the years to participate in what we called continuity of government programs, basic procedures that had been developed and safeguards to deal with a situation if the United States was ever attacked with nuclear weapons. It was something that was practiced during the period of the Cold War, and so those prior exercises immediately came to mind, and we had to do a couple of things, but one of the most important was to be able to make certain we preserved the chain of command, that if something happened to the president or the president and the vice president, that the next in line, the Speaker of the House, was moved to a secure location where he could take over as president. If something happened to him, then the President pro tem of the Senate was next in line. You had to make sure that that chain of command was preserved so that the United States would always have a government no matter what happened with respect to any one particular individual.
That day and those events ultimately led to Iraq and Saddam Hussein. Tim sent a note in for us to ask you about, said thank you for your dedicated service, number one, but was Iraq really worth it?
I think it was. The thing to remember is that Saddam Hussein had violated some 16 UN Security Council resolutions, started 2 wars, had a relationship with terrorism and terrorists, that he had produced and used weapons of mass destruction against his own people, gassing thousands of them. This was an evil man who, at that point after 9/11, when we'd been struck by men armed with hijacked aircraft and killed 3,000 of our people that morning, we were concerned that Saddam was potentially the place where there was most likely to be a linkage between somebody with weapons of mass destruction, such as Saddam Hussein, and a terrorist organization. And I believed then, and I believe now, that taking Saddam down was very important and a proper thing to do. One of the things that came out of that was when Muammar Gaddafi saw us move on Saddam, he decided he didn't want to be next, and he surrendered all of his nuclear materials. He was in the process of acquiring nuclear capability from Mr. A.Q. Khan, who was a black marketeer who'd helped Pakistan acquire its capabilities. We also were able to take down the A.Q. Khan network, so all of this helped to make that part of the world safer than it had been, as we were able to shut off 3 different avenues of proliferation of nuclear weapons capability. So it was important.
That whole chapter obviously led to a lot of political peril for the White House, and you talk in your book about the fact that Colin Powell had knowledge of who, in fact, had leaked the identity of Valerie Plame, yet sat quiet next to the president when he was being pummeled with questions from the press about it, and for a subsequent time after, your friend Scooter Libby went through a very tough situation there. Colin Powell now says, that you're cheap-shotting him, and also that in fact the FBI told him not to say anything. Do you accept that as a reasonable reason for his silence?
Well, my frustration was that we went into a situation where the alleged violation here was that somebody had leaked the name of Valerie Plame, who was a CIA employee, to the press. And that was the cause of the investigation, that the investigation ran on for more than 2 years. It forced a lot of our White House personnel to hire attorneys, had to go before grand juries, had to pay for the attorneys themselves because this was a potential criminal matter, and the government won't pay for that. And then we found out much later that, in fact, the Justice Department and the special prosecutor knew that the source of the leak was Rich Armitage, who was the Deputy Secretary of State. It wasn't anybody in the White House. It wasn't Karl Rove. It wasn't Scooter Libby. And our guys were drugged through all the difficulties of that investigation unnecessarily. And then in the final analysis, nothing was ever done with respect to Mr. Armitage, who had been the original source of the leak, and Scooter Libby was the only one who was ever charged. It was a source of considerable frustration, especially once we found out that they'd known from the very beginning that that was the source of the leak.
Another question from a listener. Sid says, what's your view on energy production in the U.S. and how much it influences foreign policy?
Well, I think energy is a vital commodity, obviously, for our economy. We can't run our economy without it. We've built the world's most foremost economy, biggest and most successful economy, I think, based upon certain types of energy being available at certain costs to us, and it's important that we recognize as we go forward certain questions that are raised about where we get it, about the reliability of supply, about the cost, and so forth. But I think to date we've been fairly successful. I know the developments up there in the Dakotas, North Dakota especially, have been enormously successful in recent months in terms of developing those resources. We've been fortunate to find a lot of natural gas various places around the country. So I think, frankly, the technology that's involved and the investment that's required is a very important part of our economy.
Sid goes on to say, to ask you about North Dakota and Wyoming and other states that can help the U.S. situation. And North Dakota has the lowest unemployment right now, fastest job growth, a big surplus, largely as a result of energy development. Yet you have a war on oil coming from the administration towards domestic energy production, which just is unceasing. So much so, believe it or not, I'm sure you've not heard about this story, but the Obama Justice Department, through the North Dakota U.S. Attorney, is now suing 7 oil companies doing business in North Dakota because they found 28 dead birds over a period of 45 days. Can you believe that that's criminal?
I hadn't heard that, but I guess given the way this administration operates in the energy field, I'm not really surprised by it. I want to ask your advice.
I want to ask your advice about anything you'd like to talk about in the way of things you think might help the person that ultimately could replace President Obama, and that's the GOP field. You've got, for one, Rick Perry kind of surging to the top right now, and a lot of folks think there's sort of a war of sorts politically between the Bush camp and the Perry camp. Is that real?
Well, I don't know all the details. I haven't endorsed anybody or signed on with anybody at this stage in terms of next year's campaign. I expect I will support the Republican nominee, obviously, and I hope we get a good one. I think it's very important that we defeat the Obama administration. I think they've had close to 3 years now, and they've got another year to go, but the economy's not in good shape, and they don't appear to have any answers with respect to how they can fix that. We've got serious unemployment problem. Things obviously are different up there in the Dakotas, but across the country we've got millions of Americans who are out of work and badly need jobs, and I think we need to put in place a set of policies that take the regulatory burden off much of the private sector, that encourages people and companies to invest and to grow, to create jobs, to create wealth, to create opportunities for people. And a lot of that is going to require a style of leadership from the president that President Obama so far has not demonstrated.
What do you think of the role of the Tea Party in influencing the political scene and selecting a Republican nominee? Mitt Romney is an example in the race, but seems to sort of be keeping the Tea Party at arm's length. Is that a mistake, and do you see this movement as a game changer?
Well, I think the Tea Party's been very important because I think it's helped emphasize, especially to the Congress, the importance of getting a handle on the deficit problem. We have, in fact, run up very significant national debt. We need to put in place long-term policies to pay down that debt so we don't burden our kids and grandkids with it. And I think the Tea Party movement has been very helpful in focusing the attention of the political class on those issues. So I think they've been a net plus in terms of where we are. What their impact will be in 2012, whether or not there's a particular candidate who's going to benefit from that, I think only time will tell.
Can Mitt Romney, for instance, beat Obama by keeping the Tea Party at arm's length?
Well, I'm reluctant to put forward propositions with respect to what kind of strategy any one of our candidates ought to pursue. I like Mitt Romney. I think he's a good man. We've got a lot of other good candidates out there, and they're going to have to go out and earn the support of Republicans and of Americans across the spectrum, including Democrats and independents, and it'll be their call as to how they want to do that.
Can we afford another stimulus plan from President Obama, who's set to announce a new jobs plan? Believe it or not, looks like it's stimulus 2 or 3 and more government spending and shovel-ready projects. Can we afford that?
Well, I have my doubts. I haven't seen the details of his pending proposal, obviously. It's just speculation at this point, but so far I haven't heard anything that leads me to believe he's going to take in the right direction. I hark back to Ronald Reagan when he came in. We had significant economic problems when he got elected in 1980, and he went to work, and we put together a fundamental change in tax policy, and encouraged the kind of growth and development that was absolutely vital to creating a long-term period of economic growth. I think we need to think in those terms. I worry that in the Obama administration, the kind of thing they're talking about isn't going to be any more successful next year than it was in the last 3.
Final question. You go from Wyoming to Vice President of the United States and serve ultimately in one of the most consequential periods in the history of the United States of America. As you look back on that service, what would you say was the pinnacle and what was the low point?
Well, I think the pinnacle were the years that I got to spend with overseeing the U.S. military as Secretary of Defense. I have enormous respect for the men and women who serve in the military. They do tremendous work. I was privileged to be there when we went through Desert Storm and the first Gulf War, and they performed magnificently. I've always thought that was a very special time in our history. The difficult period would be, 9/11 itself, and the fact that we lost 3,000 of our people that morning. But I feel very good about the period after that we were able to keep the country safe for the next 7.5 years, and I think laid the groundwork for the ultimate capture of Osama bin Laden, which you've got to give President Obama credit for ordering in the SEAL Team 6 when he did. But I think a lot of the groundwork for that operation was laid with the military and our intelligence capabilities back during our time in office.
It's a fabulous book, In My Time, a personal and political memoir. Our friend Dick Cheney, a great contribution to history. Great to talk to you, sir. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, Scott. Good luck to you.
God bless you. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.